Welcome to Working with Feeling. This is Orange Shy. Belonging. This is a deeply personal theme that I think many of us can connect with. I'll share more about why that is for me. I first want to take a moment to connect it back to the prior episode and our conversation with Jacqueline around what it means to have deeper connection, human to human, and why that's so essential to continue doing great work and making an impact. We spoke about the cultural pressures and expectations that get in the way of having true connection, as well as what's been shifting in our society, including the disappearing of third spaces that we have historically used in order to connect. In this episode, we're going to go deeper into that tension between the cultural expectations and our true neurobiological wiring for connection. This is something I'm sure you've heard before. We're wired for connection. So we'll explore a little bit more about what does that actually mean and what can I do as it relates to my personal growth, my commitment to working with feeling in order to support myself and those around me to have a greater sense of cohesiveness, belonging, and the meaning that comes along with it. I'll start by going back to this being a real personal theme for me. Likely, like many of you listening, I felt in social situations like a bit of an outsider. Even when among friends and having interesting conversations, I had this persistent feeling in much of my life of just being a bit different. And it really wasn't until very recently, more recently than I'd like to admit, that I realized through my work with one of my somatic coaches that there was this ingrained pattern of self-protection that actually got in the way of connecting as meaningfully as I desired with other people. I began to connect more with my really subtle physiological shifts that were happening in social situations and recognizing patterns of pulling back, contracting, holding back my own perspectives. This pattern was not something that was totally new to me. What was new to me was recognizing what is happening within my body right before I actually do these things. And the expectation that I had that I shouldn't need to be heard around certain things, or that I should be extra super duper thoughtful about how I articulate things. I have a friend who loves to point out when I'm being overly thoughtful, and I have a commitment to her to being less thoughtful when I speak, because I'd be in these interactions and people would be asking for more of me to show up, and I was holding back. And like anything in life, that shows up everywhere. And I believe the reason I've been able to make substantial shifts as it relates to this over the last several years is because of the somatic awareness that I've cultivated. That ability to sense what's shifting within the body as it happens. Because the reality is being quote unquote vulnerable, being open, putting yourself out there is incredibly activating for most of us. If you're like me and you tended to keep your ideas to yourself for much of your life, potentially even more so. But I think most of us experience some level of before we put ourselves out there. So I'll share with you some more specifics, but I want to start with a grounding in what exactly is going on here and how can we shift the way that we're relating to these dynamics such that we can open up new possibilities for ourselves and work with the feeling as opposed to trying to overwrite it, push it away, or somehow shift our thinking and magically manifest more belonging in our lives and our teams. We really can't talk about connection without talking about vulnerability. And when I hear vulnerability, who do I immediately think of? Brené Brown, of course. Brené has helped us understand the relationship between shame and vulnerability and connection in such a powerful way. And I want to offer you a next place that you can take that understanding to, because I think most people listening to this will be very familiar with Brené Brown. And that next place is the role our nervous system plays in being able to navigate the discomfort that is inherent to being vulnerable in order to facilitate connection. Opening ourselves up, exposing ourselves naturally triggers a physiological response. I'll remind my clients of this often, that so many of our behaviors come back to the ways we've learned to ensure that we continue belonging within the groups that are important to us, because that is how we survived. Evolutionarily, we could not survive without the group. Largely what we're facing in terms of the loneliness epidemic we spoke about on the last episode is our culture tells us that we should be able to survive and thrive by ourselves. We should be able to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps, and insert your cliche here around hyper-individualism. But it's clear to most of us, we cannot lead quote unquote successful lives on our own. As social animals, what gives us meaning is that presence and connection. So let's start by just naming this tension that exists in the modern world right now. We have to make it explicit. So in one hand, literally look at your hands. In one hand, you have this cultural pressure, this weight, this expectation of you should be able to figure it out. You should be able to be successful, to achieve whatever it is that you intend to achieve, to maintain a sense of well-being through sheer dedication and follow through and commitment yourself. Look at the heroes of many different films and you'll see this dynamic at play. Then look at your other hand. You have what you know deep down and what we all know scientifically about our need, physically, biologically wired in our neurology for connection, down to the neurochemicals swimming through our bloodstream at any given moment. So as a high performer, you've been holding this tension throughout your life and your professional career and have been nudged along the way to push through discomfort, to just keep going, and that it's supposed to suck. You pay your dues. To me, this is pretty silly because there's a way that does not deny our need for ongoing continuous connection, and that welcomes in all the associated emotional richness that's part of that. And when you look at all the challenges, the toxic workplaces and cultures, leadership challenges, so much of it comes back to this denial of our humanity and what it means to be a human animal. We are in these continuous cycles of stress, anxiety, and depletion, what I refer to as the sad cycle. Stress, anxiety, and depletion serves to perpetuate the disconnection by keeping us ping-ponging between hyper and hypoarousal. It's a very precarious place for the nervous system to be. So by learning how to work with the nervous system to identify when we're in hyperarousal or hypoarousal and return into our window of tolerance, into a centered presence, it's core to our capacity for vulnerability and deepening relationships. The reality is we can't be in that hyper-individual survival mode while also having the inner state required for deeper connection. So yeah, it is a bit of a paradigm shift to reconcile that tension, to begin recognizing our interdependence, not as a weakness, but as a beautiful strength that's core to being human. By ensuring that we create the environments and the space for true connection, we're supporting the neurochemistry we need for resilience, for creativity, innovation. And you as a leader can model this, normalize opening up about what's real for you with others, building relational trust. It comes back to, how are you listening? To what degree are you here when interacting with others, as opposed to in your head due to all the pressures and distractions? Checking in, pausing, building this skill set of social relational intelligence. The way this all starts is by making the shift from an orientation of control to an orientation of connection within ourselves, from control to connection. Noticing in what ways, just like I was doing, am I trying to control the way I'm being perceived? Am I trying to control whether or not somebody will determine that I should be part of their group? Am I trying to grip onto my team members' trust and belief in me and confidence in me? And recognizing instead that actually if I start with connecting to what's actually real right here within me and what's real with the people around me, What do I need? What do we need? Are we in a moment of intense emotional charge and buildup where we really need to shake it off, literally allow the body to activate and move all that pent up charge through? Or are we in a moment where we need a bit more softness? We need to slow things down and allow ourselves space to fully acknowledge and process what's going on. You guys, approaching things this way is so much more fun. It just takes practice. It's going to be a little bit awkward at first, most likely. It might take people around you a moment to adjust. And the reality is, centering human connection in this way will need to be an ongoing practice. It will take ongoing intention because as of right now, it's just not the cultural water we're swimming in. And this is what it means to be a part of modeling something different, is letting this become who you are across all kinds of situations and contexts. Approaching belonging in this way from the inside out is what really is at the root of psychological safety, true collaboration, of having adaptable, high-performing teams that can navigate change and be resilient. So much of what you're seeing on LinkedIn is overcomplicating, or at least starting from the wrong place. Aliens can come down from Uranus with 100 times our intelligence and give us the prescription of this is how you lead your teams most effectively. Follow these steps. It still won't work if we're not embodying the change ourselves. We are too wired for connection at the neurological level. We sense, mostly unconsciously, where somebody else stands, how safe they feel, and how truly open they're being with us, and we respond in kind. All right, so I promise you some ways to action on this that have worked for me, that work for my clients. The ones I'll share are more bite-sized, easier to implement right off the bat. 1, eye contact. Different brains naturally relate to eye contact differently, but generally speaking, this is something that we can pay more attention to, and not only in more intimate relationships, but I don't mean just in terms of amount of time that we're spending with eye contact. I also, of course, don't mean staring into people's eyes. What I'm referring to is, where is your attention when you're making eye contact with others? Can you practice listening to what's being said as well as to the emotional resonance of what's being said? And when you are speaking, can you do the same and sense into where am I speaking from? From what kind of state? From a calmer place, from a centered place, from a more unstable place? Not because this needs to be changed right off the bat, but because just recognizing that gives you an opportunity to be open about it. Recognizing it in others gives you an opportunity to acknowledge that. So that's eye contact and attention. And I encourage you to practice this with people who fall more into the category of acquaintances at first, and just play around with what giving 10% more as you're making eye contact, what that opens up for the connection. Second thing, before entering a social situation, a meeting, give yourself a moment. It can be just a few seconds to put down whatever you're carrying with you. Most of us move through life carrying a ton of things around from one interaction to another that we don't necessarily need to bring with us. So how can you support whatever it is that needs to move through to do so before you move into your next interaction, so that you can set yourself up for the highest likelihood of real connection? Now, I coach a lot of people who just seeing their calendars makes you want to take a nap. So for some of us, this is going to take sitting ourselves down and being honest. To what extent do I actually prioritize this? Maybe there's a part of me that believes that I can't afford the 1 minute this will take before starting a meeting. I encourage you to hear that part out and seek some support from others to create a sense of safety for giving yourself the space that's required in order to facilitate true connection and not to put it off. If you need support around that, reach out to me. I am constantly referring people to other practitioners as well as articles that could be supportive. So give these 2 things a shot. I would love to hear what you're taking from this episode, what's most impactful that you put into practice, as well as what other things you'd like to hear on future episodes. If you found this at all helpful, please make sure to subscribe and leave a review. help us create more models in the world for these cultural shifts at the foundation, at the root of creating a more connected, more enjoyable world to be in and work in. See you next time.